I know what Agnes would say. Mother turned back to look at me. Her voice changed. It was sharper, more determined. I was frightened, as she had never spoken to me like that before. We are proud animals, Audrey. Don't let anyone tell you differently. We may look docile, and perhaps most of us do accept our lot without complaint. But don't think that we wouldn't rush out into the world beyond the electric fences and find our place in the world, if given half a chance. Do you understand what I am saying? None of us talk about it, but that's because it's very deep inside, asleep and often forgotten. Most don't even know it's there. Mother looked at me, and she was both sad and beautiful, and I loved her so much. I think I do, I said. I think I know that feeling that you're talking about. It's hot and alive, and I feel it just after we wake up in the morning, but before I open my eyes, when I know there's a new day ahead of me and I don't know what's going to happen. Is that the feeling? Because if that's what you mean, then I think I understand. Mother came over and licked my face. She was smiling again. I know you do, Audrey. I always did. Madge. Cow. Yes, I've heard those stories, but I remain doubtful. It's all pie in the sky, wishing plain and simple. These legends get passed on from cow to cow, farm to farm, but stories aren't rocks. Rocks don't lose their basic shape, but stories are bendable and twistable. And who knows which cow added a word here or an extra sentence there. Some so desperately want to believe that a cow in the wild can survive forever and not be found that they change the story to feed that desire. But I can't live off false hope. I can't pretend that Lon is, that he might. Oh, I'm sorry, but I wasn't built to think that way. Maybe Yvonne of Bavaria did manage to stay free. In my opinion, she was likely to have been caught an hour later. Not that I had the heart to tell Audrey such cold truths just after they took her mother away. Agnes. Cow. No, I never heard that one. Whoa, that is so, spooky, eh? But what do you mean, Yvonne just disappeared? Like poof, she's gone? Gone? Holy human, that's a mystery for sure. I once saw a spaceship fly over the farm, you know. Audrey. Cow. They took Mother away the next afternoon. I knew something was not quite right, but as I said earlier, I would not allow myself to consider what that might be. Mother spent the whole morning in my company, nuzzling and grooming me like I was a newborn. She didn't say much at all, and I, out of nervousness, I suppose, talked up a storm. I explained about Eddie's new mooching trick, in which he performs a half flip in the air. I filled her in on the rift among the geese, over a comment regarding a certain someone's waddle that no apology could overcome. I described little girl Elspeth's new Sunday dress with the bright floral print and how half those flowers looked good enough to eat. Mother laughed at that, and I was relieved. But then the truck pulled in onto the property. A hush settled around the farm. The chickens stopped their complaining. The sheep put an end to their latest debate, and all you could hear was mud sloshing as Buster tried impossibly to hide away in his pen, as he always did in those situations. I could feel Mother's heart speed up a notch. Everything sped up. I was confused and afraid, unsure of what was happening. The latch of the carriage door squealed open. Humans' steps shuffled closer. Before I even realized that Mother was up. "Stay here with Madge," she said. I did as I was told. In hindsight, I realized there were precious seconds before Mother was led from the barn and out of sight. I could have said something. I could have said, "I love you, Mother," or "Wait for me," or "Don't be scared." The truck drove off, followed by a giant sigh, as if all the animals on the farm had been holding their breath. Madge. Cow. The poor girl stood in the same place for hours after that blasted truck took Janine. Heart-wrenching. The child was stunned for several days. She would barely eat, would barely move unless she heard a motor vehicle approaching. Then she'd bolt toward the yard, and you just knew she was expecting to see her mother back from whatever mysterious trip she'd been on. Yes, it was heart-wrenching, plain and simple. Eddie. Dog. Audrey was sad and lonely. She didn't want to play or go exploring or any of the things we used to have fun doing together. I couldn't do anything to cheer her up either. Dad said leave her be, but I didn't want to. Jeepers, Audrey was my friend. It hurt me to see her so miserable. Tried bringing her some of her favorite flowers from the far hill. I dropped them by her side, and she'd look at them and say, thanks, but the next day they would still be right where I left them. Audrey. Cow. Nothing felt the same after Mother was taken away. My world was topsy-turvy. I could not make sense of life. It had suddenly become unjust and cruel, or indifferent. Yes, indifferent is the word. As indifferent as inclement weather. There were thunderstorms and hailstorms inside me, thick fog patches filling up my head, cold stabbing ice running through my veins, and my heart shriveled up by a relentless drought. I was bereft of my mother's nourishing love. In fairness, most of the animals were kind to me, and if not kind, then respectful. Farmer even came by with little girl Elspeth, who stroked my flank gently and sang a lullaby. I was touched, moved by such attentive gestures, even if I might not have been able to show it at the time. But strangely, it was an act of meanness that finally shook me out of my gloom. Norma was holding court with some of the ladies, as is her practice, going down her weekly list of animals deserving of ridicule. I was tucked away in a dark corner of the barn, unseen, and I might have paid them no mind had it not been for hearing my name. And what about little orphan Audrey? Norma sniggered. How many days is that girl going to wear a cloud over her head like a spring bonnet? I assumed that with her over-the-top imagination, she'd be thinking her mother had pulled an Yvonne and ended up in cow paradise instead of Abbott's War. Upon hearing Norma's words, I was overcome by two conflicting emotions, both as powerful as water blasts from the nozzle of the barn's cleaning hose. Up until that moment, I never allowed myself to acknowledge that Mother had been taken to Abbott's War. Mother was absent, yes, but not gone. Nothing so final as that. Of course, it was obvious, but when you're truly afraid, your mind can play tricks on you. Hearing it from Norma's spiteful mouth finally woke me up. But the mention of Yvonne of Bavaria was like a magic spell. It was as though hearing those words allowed me to suddenly grow wings and fly above Bittersweet Farm and the thick sorrow that surrounded me, so that I could see farther than I ever had before. Maybe Mother did pull an Yvonne, as Norma put it. Why not? Mother was clever. Why on earth would she tell me stories of cows who had escaped if she wasn't intending to be one herself? Eddie. Dog. Darn tootin', it was great. It was as if someone had flicked a switch on Audrey. 1 second she was as silent and still as Corner Rock, and the next she was back to her usual Audrey self. Well, mostly. Aw, heck, it was still swell because I had missed her. So it didn't make any difference whether she was going on a mile a minute about the grass-tasting tour of Europe she was planning, or about her mom, how her mom escaped and was living the good life. All I knew was that Audrey was back to being her old, terrific self, and I was tail-wagging happy. I remember telling Dad about Audrey's return to good spirits. All he said was, Best not to get too close to a cow of her category. Madge, a cow. I couldn't let it continue. Janine had put Audrey's care into my hooves, and I wasn't about to let the girl live in some fantasy forever. She had to face the facts, plain and simple. Audrey had to come back to earth. She didn't understand yet how the world worked. Those stories about escape were offering nothing but future pain. She was probably thinking Janine tipped the truck like April and May, and now she was living in some cow's paradise. Let me be clear here. I wasn't trying to be cruel in order to get Audrey to accept her mother's death. I was more concerned that Audrey should accept that her mother's fate would also be her own. Audrey, cow. Clover green, a tasty treat. I'm grateful for each one I eat. And there was Madge, giving it to me straight. I panicked. I admit it, I did. The truck will come for me as well? I too am destined for Abbott's War? You're not a child anymore, Madge said. You need to know. Not a child? Yes, I understood. But then, is that what growing up is all about? Learning one piece of horrible information after another? Is there no joy or hope mixed in there too? How much pain and sorrow was my poor heart to bear? Eddie, bless his big, big heart, held on to hope like it was his favorite bone. Don't worry, Audrey, he said over and over. We'll figure something out. You bet we will. Darn tootin', I promise. Oh, Eddie, what would I have done without my faithful, loyal friend? Later, I made my way to Viewing Hill on my own. You can do your best thinking on Viewing Hill. I should have been distraught, but I kept hearing Eddie's voice in my head. We'll figure something out, Audrey. And I was thinking of Mother telling me stories of Yvonne of Bavaria and April and May on the highway. And then I remembered the one thing Mother said to me, something I didn't think was important at the time, because Mother often said things like that. It was when we were returning from the grove, and I suppose I was impatient to find Eddie and tell him everything I had just learned. Mother said, Audrey, I am not as fast or agile as I used to be. Why don't you run up ahead? I was hesitant because I thought it would be rude to leave Mother, but then she laughed and added, There are lots of pleasures in this world, my dear daughter, but nothing gives me more joy than watching you rushing off, all full of life and free as a bird. Then it dawned on me, Mother hadn't been telling me what she intended to do. She was telling me what I should do. Be free as a bird. Stay alive, Audrey. I could hear her voice saying in my head, Stay alive, be free, escape. Good.